This is your host and producer, John Beethan, with AlternativeHealthTools.com, the podcast. And this is episode 60, titled Enneagram, Wisdom Path to Meeting Yourself. It's subtitled, A Perfect Episode for Our Challenging Times. All of this with Gerise Pappas, who we first had on episode 58, November 1st, 2016. Today, Gerise asks the question, what does it take to love every part of yourself, and what are the challenges to meet ourselves there? There are several references on the website and the show notes to many books that Gerise talks about, and there's a parable called The Little Acorn. So come visit us at AlternativeHealthTools.com, where together we discover new and alternative health tools and resources from alternative healthcare practitioners and experts. Welcome back. This is John Beethan, your host at AlternativeHealthTools.com, the podcast, and back by popular demand from episode 58, which is Gerise Pappas. That particular episode was titled Enneagram Wisdom, The Alchemy of You, which was published on November 1st, 2016. And welcome back, Gerise.
Thank you, John.
Popular demand. Isn't that fun?
It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's up?
What's up? Well, there's a lot up these days, isn't there, John?
Yeah, there is.
And it's all of what seems to be up seems to be bringing about a lot of emotion in people.
Do you think it has to do with the election, which we're not going to talk about necessarily? But I mean, do you think things are stirred up from that?
I think the election was a catalyst. Mm-hmm. And however, I feel like there has been what the election catalyzed has been wanting to happen in human consciousness for a long time. So it really didn't matter who was elected, really. What's happening now was wanting to happen. And so therefore, because it is happening, there is this exquisite opportunity. And what's exciting to me is it seems like there is this heightened interest. People are in people understanding themselves. There seems to be a more interest in understanding the other person. There's interest in looking at, for instance, shall I say the word Trump? What motivates this guy, right? So, but at a personal level, it's what motivates us, what motivates each other. And what motivates you, and what motivates me, yeah. Right, at the very personal level. Mm-hmm. So, people, myself included, seem challenged right now. And there seems to be a lot of pain, a lot of fear. Also, a lot of people seem to be actively charged within to take inspired action. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a lot of all of this. And I feel that on my way this morning, I spent most of the morning in a meditative place, getting ready for what would come through today. And on my way over here, I was feeling so vulnerable. I actually literally started to cry as I was driving over here, feeling what it takes to meet ourselves, what it takes for me to meet myself, what it takes for me to show up today and be a portal for wisdom to come through me. I won't kid you. It took everything. It takes everything for me to sit here. And yet there isn't any other place I would want to be than right here, and allowing myself to be a vehicle for the wisdom of the Enneagram to come through me. and be of benefit to others.
Awesome. Well, welcome again.
Thank you.
All of you. All
Thank
the
you.
parts.
Well, I'm going to play right off of that because that is really what seems to be a theme right now, and it's loving all of who we are. What does it take to love all of who we are? What does it take to meet yourself?
You're asking me?
I'm asking everybody listening right now.
Yeah.
What does it take? And in my experience, it takes everything. I'm not going to candy coat this process one bit. Because it takes a deep, authentic willingness to love, to meet, to listen to everything that arises in ourselves. And our conditioning has us practiced, not by virtue of, one day you decided to practice this, but I will say that your Enneagram, that invisible yet very felt Enneagram mechanism inside of you, which can be called a personality type, it could be called a mechanism, it could be called a style, a point, what have you, but it is a holographic living system map inside of you and me and everyone that animates all we do, what we think, how we respond, how we react. And it somewhat holds the code in a certain way. And yet we can disidentify and break the code, which allows us to break these habits and conditionings that allow us to more intimately be with ourselves, more intimately love ourselves. And when that has happened, then there's something that opens up inside of us, that not only do we have this wonderful field of friendliness and availability living inside of us, restored, but we're able to see others more truly and the whole world. This Enneagram system, it's I liken it sometimes in a way to like the Da Vinci Code. It's often misunderstood. It's actually this system. It's somewhat based in natural law and arithmetic and algorithms. That there's this intelligence to the lines and the points in the Enneagram, the law of 1, the law of 3, the law of 7. I'm not going to go into that today, but those all live inside of the Enneagram. It's in nature, it is in the world at large, and it lives in ourself, in all of ourselves, in this holographic way. So a lot of times, people who have heard of the Enneagram, people can get really hung up on, what type am I? Well, guess what? You're all of them. Everybody's all of them. And I do not diminish the importance of this, there is a core originating type. There is a core originating holographic Enneagram map that is inside of each and every one of us. We do have a core starting point that develops our survival strategy, how we cope, how we contract, how we survive. It really is ultimately our survival strategy. But as life presses into us, as people, our mothers might have stubbed their toe on their way into the bathroom, and little Johnny's 2 years old, and next thing you know, the mother screams, and little Johnny thinks it has something to do with little Johnny. And all of a sudden, depending on what Enneagram mapping system is inside of little Johnny is going to either pull away and recoil a bit, and ultimately, as life happens, and dogs are barking, or people bully us, or even wonderful things happen. Really, truly, getting tremendous accolades as a little kid for bringing home, gold stars. That can, for a certain Enneagram type, can be, I want more of that, right? So that ends up, for another Enneagram type, that could end up building that as a survival strategy, right? At the core of it all, I think for all of us, it comes down to ways of mitigating feeling fear. It's all a relationship to fear in one way or another. And ultimately, to be loved. Feeling love, being loved, period. And that's the nascent motivating factors, really, is fear and love. Seems like a good pausing point at the moment.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask anything?
No. I'm feeling pretty quiet inside. So you may continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a student in the room.
So what I would like to, what I'd like to go back to is, it's not so much about getting identified with a type.
Yeah.
And I really can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, it's like after our episode 58, and one day I contacted you and with a number, and it's like you straightened me out right off the bat, saying, "No, I'm not a number. You're not a number. We are all the numbers."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's not put each other in a box. Let's not stick a label on us. As a good wise teacher once told me, labels are for pickle jars.
Yes. And yet, as with all true systems, I will contradict myself all over the place, because guess what? We were born in this box. So yes, there's something to, putting others in a box is not necessarily, a wise choice. But there is this system living inside of us that is, it's advantageous, and it's actually paramount key. I can't emphasize how important it is to become aware and hip to how this works through us, because it is only in becoming aware that we can liberate ourselves. So there's an irony here. Basically, it's through the process of observing, through the process of self-inquiry, and really truly being an active participant in our own evolution. That's the crux of how the Enneagram can be beneficial to our growth, to waking up, to our ultimate evolution, the evolution of ourselves and as a soul. So I'd like to share a kind of like a teaching story. And this is a parable that is in a book called The Wisdom Way of Knowing, that author Cynthia Bourgeault wrote. And it captures the essence of what this Enneagram as an ancient knowledge tradition says about us as humans and our process. So here's the story. Once upon a time, in a not-so-faraway land, there was a kingdom of acorns nestled at the foot of a grand old oak tree. Since the citizens of the kingdom were modern, fully Westernized acorns, they were about their business with purposeful energy. And since they were midlife baby boomer acorns, they engaged in a lot of self-help courses. There were seminars called Getting All You Can Out of Your Shell. There were woundedness and recovery groups for acorns who had been bruised in their original fall from the tree. There were spas for oiling and polishing those shells and various acornopathic therapies to enhance longevity and well-being. One day, in the midst of this kingdom, there suddenly appeared a naughty little stranger, apparently dropped out of the blue by a passing bird. He was capless and dirty, making an immediate negative impression on his fellow acorns. And crouched beneath the oak tree, he stammered out a wild tale. Pointing upward at the tree, he said, "We are that." Delusional thinking, obviously, the other acorns concluded, but one of them continued to engage him in conversation. "So tell us, how would we become that tree?" "Well," he said, pointing downward, "it has something to do with going into the ground and cracking open the shell." "Insane," they responded. "Totally morbid." "Why, then we wouldn't be acorns anymore." Right?
Wow. Yeah, right.
That is such a powerful story. In a way, the shell, to me, represents our personality, represents this.
Think we hang ourselves on around other people and ourselves?
Well, it's what I'm referring to as the Enneagram type that lives inside of us, that we interact with the world with, that we get so identified with. Mm-hmm. And a part of us can even get terrified of that shell breaking and cracking. And yet, it isn't until the shell cracks and we let ourselves be penetrated by the soil and the nutrients and the whole process of life that we can grow into the fullness of the tree and be the beautiful, magnificent oak tree.
Awesome.
And the big, magnificent oak tree is essentially us playing with every point in the Enneagram, being able to embody being a fully integrated human being. You see, so it's kind of ironic. We're born, we kind of get unconsciously identified with this personality type that lives within us. We don't even realize it's happening. Most of the time, we don't. We're just trying to get, love from our mother or something like that. Mm-hmm. But as we do that, we're doing it a particular way and getting identified, just like we're getting identified with the shell. Mm. So I just find this to be incredibly powerful. And I think as in life, as we get reminded about the potential that we are, we can be encouraged It might feel like we're being annihilated just because we're letting go of particular personality defenses. But it's not true. It's actually not true. So, like the little acorn, what seems requisite in this process of us waking up is going underground, so to speak. But the acorn literally goes underground. The likeness of that in ourselves is being willing to go deep inside of ourselves, to practice the self-inquiry, to practice the self-reflection, to become interested in understanding what our originating motivations are. Mm-hmm. And the miraculous thing that happens is that as we do that, it creates space. A space gets created that then allows us to make a new decision. I remember many years ago, it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, as I was becoming intimately aware about what my Enneagram type is and how it was. I was going to say how it was ruining my life. No. Hey, you got to laugh at yourself, folks. I got to tell you. It's one of my salvations in life is that I can laugh at myself. Good God, my Enneagram type as, now I'm not so counterphobic, but there was a period where I was classically, known as a counterphobic 6. And oh my God, but I walk into a room with, just in a ballsy way and trying to take care of my friends and defend them and da-da-da. And, it was exhausting being me. I have to just tell you, it was exhausting being me. And I thought I was helping my friends a lot of times, maybe I did sometimes, but there was a way that I had so much energy in defense and protection, and that I was totally unaware how cut off I was from feeling myself and really truly being in tune with the other people that I care about, the ones that I care about the most. So this is where taking the time and working with someone like myself, for instance, who can support you in being able to lovingly meet yourself, to lovingly meet where we're defended. I know we're talking, I have this beautiful acorn story, but that the other analogy about being fish in our own fishbowl, it can be, while it's an inside job, oftentimes it's helpful to work with someone else because what somebody who has the wisdom and vision can do is help you, suspend you as the little fish out of the fishbowl for a moment. Then once we get hip to what these patterns are that take us down these paths that may not be of service to us, we in that moment where we are taking a moment to look inside and reflect, a space gets created that we can make a new choice. And I promise you, because I see this in my life, I am not even close to the person I was 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. The other gift of this process of really applying yourself to understanding yourself through the lens of the Enneagram is you become more of who you truly are. It just happens. It happens, but it happens with practice. It happens every day that I feel fear come into my mind or negative thoughts, I was like, okay, I stop. I pause with them. Sometimes I may need to, when a dog will like shake and let fear move through it, it's like a PTSD reaction. Sometimes I have to still let it go through me.
Shake it off.
Shake it off. Feel it all the way through. And yet I'm reminding myself at the process, during the process, at this point in my development, I do have access to an active witness that is with me and knows, and I'm reminding myself, I'm not my personality system. I'm more than my personality system. I am this highest witness who is lovingly holding how my personality system is transforming breath by breath, moment by moment, by point of focus of attention to point of focus of attention. This was not, I never thought I would say this, but, I was raised Catholic, and one of my favorite things that I was told Jesus said, because I didn't literally hang out with Jesus, is that the kingdom of heaven lives within you. And I love that. And that is my experience with this. And I actually feel like the Enneagram gives us access to this kingdom of heaven that lives within us.
As an example, what would you say?
I'm feeling it right now. I'm feeling it right now. There is this wave of peacefulness. There's something about, okay, let me try to answer your question. I won't kid you. I was feeling a tremendous amount of fear. Sitting here, what was going to come through me today? Sitting at this microphone, and I kept meeting myself. I kept letting myself be guided by my highest vision, which is to be of service, to let myself be a wisdom leader, to not disallow the fear. It actually, I have learned, whether I like it or not, it needs to be met. And in the meeting of it, it transmutes. So here, I've been doing that the whole time. And then I get to this, unexpected holy moment where I'm remembering what Jesus said. And I'm also thinking of the triangle in this. And I may or may not go into all of the different types today, because I feel like I did that quite well in the last segment. There is a central triangle in the Enneagram, and there's a 9 at the top of the triangle, there's a 3 at the bottom right of the triangle, and there is a 6 at the bottom left of the triangle. And the triangle is, it can have a holy inference in a certain way. In Christianity, it's the Holy Trinity. But it has so regardless of where one starts in the Enneagram, this central triangle is a core part of our being. So this Trinity, this 9-6-3 triangle as the bedrock core of the Enneagram that again lives inside of us, this as a whole, this triangle itself, this Trinity, which is also likened to the law of 3. It represents creation. So it's so encoded within us in this 369, 963, however you want to say it doesn't matter, relationship, is the activation point for creation within us and all processes that we go through. So it turns out that, speaking of type 3, and there would be in some ways even more emphasis for someone who would be a type 3, but the core transformational theme connected to type 3 is disidentification from the personality through observation. So again, I'll say that one more time. So, and I'm not, right now I'm not speaking, I'm speaking to the overall process. So I'm not speaking to qualities that go with type 3, but as it relates to the power of this trinity, this central triangle, which is the hub of the Enneagram, that the core transformational theme, again, connected to type 3, is actually actively disidentification from the personality through observation. The second step, and this is all inside of the Enneagram being a wisdom path of awakening, right? This is just to, again, reiterate the context. So type 6, which is on the bottom left of the triangle, is all about surrendering to the fear and emotional suffering associated with loosening our personality or ego defenses so that we can put down our defenses and integrate our shadow. Our shadow being the disassociated or warded off feelings or aspects of ourselves that we deemed, well, we didn't even actually deem them anything. They're aspects of ourselves that all of a sudden we became unconscious to, but are nonetheless having quite an impact on the show, so to speak. And then the third piece, the 9, so, and symbolized by the 9, is actively working toward transcendence and union. And this is so that we can rise above our limited view of our personality as fish in the fishbowl, as I was saying earlier, and merge with this greater sense of our wholeness, of peace, of tranquility, of ultimately being able to live from our highest self. And I just can't emphasize enough that this process requires so much humility. You know, our defenses can be so strong, so very strong. And like that little acorn, I'm always now going to keep an image of, the big oak tree in my mind's eye as a representation, and I'm going to have it be a gold large oak tree, as the illuminated human being that I am growing into and that we all can grow into. So what does it take, going back to what does it take to meet ourselves? What are some of the challenges that come along with each type that lives inside of us? So I could speak to that.
Do.
If you'd like.
It would almost feel like a summary of what you've come to.
Well, I was actually going to spend a little bit of time, in the Enneagram, we have, people, if you look in different books, and I will say one of my favorite references is Beatrice Chestnut's The Complete Enneagram, 27 Paths to Greater Knowledge. It's a fantastic reference. And so some of this material comes directly from there. But very commonly, there's something called the passions in the Enneagram. And these are essentially emotional states or unconscious needs that drive how we focus our attention. And so I'm going to speak to what this is in each type. And I'm really glad in the last segment that I spoke to the glory of kind of like the illuminated highest virtues that we can all attain, because this part isn't as much fun. But we might as well have a little bit of reality,
right?
As we
right, just like in past life regression, we can't all be kings and queens.
Not every life.
No,
not every life.
No, I know.
So, beginning, I'm going to start with the one in the Enneagram, and what can often be a unconscious emotion is anger, and the one is part of the gut or the belly triad, and so this anger though will often exist in the type 1 in a repressed version. And it can show up as irritation, can show up as resentment, it can show up as annoyance. And this anger is, unlike somebody like me feeling anger, how it lives in a 1, it's often fueled by a drive toward perfection. The 1 in the Enneagram, by nature, is seeking resolution in trying to improve themselves or anyone they come into contact with, or the world, or whatever cause is motivating them. And they will also seek resolution purely in virtue as well. The type 2 in the Enneagram, what again is often an unconscious driver, is pride. And it can manifest as a need to seduce others. Can be strategically to meet their very own needs, not the needs of the other, but to get their own needs met. And the other thing that can be very unconscious with 2s is that they're unaware of what they're needing, and that these needs are actually disowned in what can be regarded as a prideful stance, and couched in doing service to others, doing service for others, rather.
Mm. Yeah, this is all making sense in terms of the episode 58.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. So, and for type 3, the unconscious driver is often vanity, or it is vanity, actually. And vanity expresses itself through a need to achieve and maintain a successful image. And this might be, it's often unconscious. Some 3s might be out there on stage, and other 3s might be much more low-key. However, there can be an inner drive to compete and achieve. And so it's whatever image is going to have them be successful. They really can be the ultimate chameleons. So this vanity factor can be extremely unconscious. So moving on to the four in the Enneagram, their passion, their unconscious driver as an emotional state is envy. And almost every four, and something I will go into in another segment, is there is something called self-preservation, one-to-one, can be referred to as bonding type, or social. Every type has subtypes. So these descriptions that I'm reading can look different depending on what subtype is actually dominant for the person. So as I'm going through all of this, just know that the expression of this can really vary depending on the subtype that is dominant. The Enneagram is very complex. It is really impossible to touch on any aspect of it in its totality in any segment. So that's part of what has had me hooked for 15 years. So back to the envy and the four. So every type 4 has something about suffering that is exaggerated in some way. And for some 4s, their suffering grows out of a habit of comparing themselves to others and feeling envious or competitive. So moving on to type 5, the emotional passion for the 5 is avarice. And the 5, let me just speak to that for a second, often has a withdrawing stance. So this avarice comes with this feeling of being compelled to withhold and to hold on to what little time, energy, or resources they believe they have. And yet this is very, very real for the 5s in the Enneagram. Very, very real. Moving on to type 6. Type 6, the emotional passion is fear. And so, there's a little bit of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, with doubt and fear. A lot of times we can have doubting thoughts that then result in us feeling fearful. And then we can have feelings of fear that then can cascade into a series of doubting thoughts. The focus of attention then is on, how to prepare so that whatever we're fearing doesn't actually come true. How do we secure ourselves? And with, getting safety, the 6 is essentially about safety and security. So I'll speak a little bit, for a second, because there are so many 6s in the world, that there can be different energetic temperatures, so to speak, to how fear can live inside of different types of 6s and how we can feel to others. So the self-preservation 6 is often referred to as a warm 6. So warm tends to be the overall feeling. And that can be a little bit, it could be one of those, head scratchers, really? Somebody's warmth is the result of somebody feeling fearful? Actually, yes, because the self-preservation or warm 6, one of their ways to disarm another person is if I meet you with hospitality and friendliness and warmth, my hope is that you will meet me in kind and nothing bad will happen. and we can come to a harmonious agreement. So in a way, warmth is the self-preservation 6's way of keeping fear at bay. If I am agreeable and warm, then fear is quieter. Then there's another expression of fear with the social 6, and the social 6s tend to be cooler, can really feel actually distant and aloof. And yet, what is actually behind that is their attention is on following rules in a certain way, with regard to the group, wanting to know what their position is and what their role is. Their sense of order is very relaxing to the 6. It keeps the 6's fear at ease. If we're operating inside of a group and people know their roles and are following the rules, then things are likely to not get out of hand, right? So it's a social way, so to speak. And again, social is not about being social, but it's one's orientation in a group, and that group could be a family, for instance.
Orientation to others.
Correct.
Generally.
Yes.
I mean, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. And then the one-to-one subtype and how that strategy is with regard to fear, and the temperature is hot, right? Mm-hmm. I'm one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're looking at another one.
And I think I'm looking at another one. Yeah. So the temperature is hot. What does hot mean? Hot means intense. Hot means we can fire up quickly. Mm-hmm. We like, if my personality type as a one-to-one 6 begins to get afraid of something, that my needs aren't going to get met, or even I'm going to be misunderstood, or what have you, my way of speaking might get quicker. I'm going to be leaning in to whatever it is for resolve, and so that's what gets called hot. It gets intense. And the hope is that if I move in on that, and I snuff out whatever I think might be potential harm to me or to another, that it will, that I'll eradicate it. So, of course so again, this is all, I'm just answering this question with regard to how this expresses itself somewhat in relationship to fear. One other aspect I'll speak to is with counterphobic 6s, which are our own unique brand. A lot of the men and women you'll see out doing crazy extreme sports, from motorcycle riding, bungee jumping, you name it. A lot of what will drive people doing extreme life-threatening things is if I can dare life in a big way, then it's almost like I'll outdo fear itself. I'm going to blow past fear and conquer it by defying it. And in that process, there's also a shut-off valve happens, and one is not aware of fear beyond a certain point, because you can't be aware of fear and do life-threatening things. So it's an absolutely feared.
So are these commonly called risk takers?
You could say that. But it's truly more extreme, because every type, mm-hmm. I'm just trying to give the flavor for the counterphobic 6 as it relates to fear. Every type could be a risk taker for a different reason. But the counterphobic 6 is, in a way, denying, it's defying fear. They're actually, they are so actually terrified of feeling fear that they go to the most extreme way to prove that they don't need to be afraid of fear. So there you go. I think I touched on the 6 well enough there.
Yeah, it's pretty well nailed in me.
Okay. Yeah. So again, that counterphobic piece, again, it's really about by going against fear from a position of strength. Mm-hmm. Now, moving on to the 7. And then 7, it's interesting. The emotional passion is gluttony. And, again, if you would go up to anybody and say, wow, go up to a 7, what's your relationship to gluttony? And if this person doesn't know anything about the Enneagram, they might look at you funny, right? Not that we would ask anybody that particular question. But this gluttony, if one is in the posture of being gluttonous, as a self-preservation 7, since I've gone a little bit on this bandwagon here, they will be searching for pleasure and satisfaction and satisfying opportunities, and will be creating a network of allies. One of my dearest friends in the world is a self-preservation 7, and let me tell you, they are a hoot and a half to have in your life. However, again, and I'm just going to use this opportunity to say that no type has a free pass. There is no type that is the type that is a better type for waking up, because one of my local colleagues, Sarah Davis, and I were leading a meetup last night, and we were talking about how sobriety is that's the virtue. The way home for the 7 is to be able to be sober emotionally. This isn't about alcohol or anything like that. So imagine if one's unconscious emotional driver is gluttony. It's like, really? Sobriety? I mean, that, especially to a 7, that can seem so boring, right? And yet, how to have that peace. I digress. Moving on to the social type 7, how the social type 7, their relationship, the gluttony expresses itself as an anti-gluttony. And it's ironic, but it's through actually being of service to others. So their orientation is, it's almost like that of the 2 in the Enneagram, or the 9. It can actually look very much like another type. This expression is a counter type for the 7. It's not so easy. That's why I love the Enneagram panels, because this can be more clarifying. There aren't as many social 7s, but this is truly their anti-gluttony expression. It's like, I don't want to be seen as that. So they put a lot of energy into their image out in the world of promoting being of service. They can be all about causes, and that will be their antidote to what could be a not so great image of being gluttonous. So the 1-to-1 expression of gluttony for the 7 is they will channel their gluttony in more of an idealistic search for the ultimate experience, the ultimate relationship. It could be awakening, but it's really whatever is going to be their ultimate experience. And it can be, an intense, savoring and a lot of energy focused on whatever it is that has their attention. They're essentially consumed by this. So moving on to type 8, the unconscious emotional passion is lust. The self-preservation type 8 goes for what is needed to survive in life in the most direct, powerful, and lusty way. The social type of the 9, lust expresses itself as a need to protect others, and they will go up against those that commit injustices. And the 1-to-1 expression of the 8 as it relates to lust is a passionate, charismatic character who will have no problem going against social conventions in a provocative way. I personally think that Donald Trump is a 1-to-1 8. So
interesting.
Just as a little...
Why do you say that?
Little tasty sidebar.
Well, it's tasty. So why do you say that? Just expound a little bit on that, please.
Well, his whole spiel, the whole campaign was, I'm anti-establishment, right? And putting forth how he will go against social convention and having no problem saying anything that's not politically correct, building a wall, comments about women. So to say he was provocative is an understatement, right? So now, of course, now that he's elected, there's another agenda that seems to be unfolding. And that could be another disorder. But as it relates to the Enneagram, there was just this single-minded agenda that he was able to accomplish, and that enough people found attractive. And that was where the charisma came in. Even though he was offending people left and right, there's a certain attractiveness to somebody that lusts for power. Right. That's one of the things that it's really a lust for with the 8. It's a lust for power. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
The 9. The 9 in the Enneagram, and this can be it's an interesting word. The emotion is the unconscious emotion is sloth, right? So sloth, even you can almost hear it in the way the word is expressed, right? It's how it expresses in a 9. It's as a need for a fusion in the service of the passion of sloth. Because merging with someone else other than themselves is it's an unconscious way that 9s will distract themselves from their own reluctance to act on their own behalf. And so it's not so obvious, right up front. And again, that's why these are unconscious. So in that last piece is I just want to say that again. It's almost, there's an unconscious reluctance to act on their own behalf from, their own sense of self. It's easier for, 9s are naturally oriented to other people's agendas. And so it's really, really a growth edge for the 9 to act on their own behalf for their own good, beginning there. And so the sloth piece is a place where the 9 self forgets, and almost an inert kind of a laziness can take over and have it be easier. It's just easier to keep the peace and become merged with the other person. And that can look a number of different ways depending on the subtype. So the 1-to-1 subtype, their favorite way of merging is with one other, typically a beloved. Loves the 1-to-1 9s love to be in intimate relationship. But the sloth element is that they become more identified with the other person's agenda than their own needs, right? It has to do with not standing up for oneself and owning their own sense of self, however that wants to express itself. The self-preservation, the sloth has to do with body or physical comforts. A lot of attention can be on having the home and stuff in their life so that they are comfortable. And there can be a sloth-like relationship to the body, meaning, what body? Do I have a body? I need to take care of this thing. I need to exercise this body. I would rather be comfortable. And the social subtype of the 9, as it relates to sloth, they can get lost with the group, actually with participating with a group. The social 9s can actually be the most active participating 9s out in the world. But the sloth piece is again losing that sense of self, but as it has to do with relationship with the group. And I would say the abiding cost of the slothness, I just made that up, is it becomes at the expense of knowing or feeling one's aliveness, really the experience of life itself, which being comfortable, that's a pretty big price, So, just to bring this back to the beginning of what I was saying, of this segment of loving who we are and meeting ourselves. This process of integration of all of who we are, of transforming ourselves, it truly is not for the faint of heart. One really needs to be ready and willing to love all aspects of ourselves. And the shadow parts, I find, are actually where the greatest jewels lie. So going back to our, little acorn that needs to go underground, and the shell needs to disintegrate and break and open so that we can become these grand oak trees of who we are. The motivation, the incentive is that, yes, is feeling fear comfortable? No. But as I meet it and as I transmute it, it opens the door to creative action, to a sense of aliveness, to me and all of us taking action on the parts of our lives that matter the most. So I would love to close with inviting, each and every one of you who is ready to begin, and it might even begin the process of lovingly meeting yourself, lovingly taking the ribbon off of these little boxes that hold jewels inside of ourselves. And to know that this process can be done with great care and great love. And yet the rewards are tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And so let yourself be surprised by life. Let yourself be surprised by the power of the Enneagram and the ancient wisdom that lives inside of you. So I'm available for one-to-one coaching, and my information will be on the Alternative Health Tools
Definitely.
Website. I'm excited to, in 2017, I'll be creating some workshops that are going to be more somatically based, so that we are
awesome.
Embodying these changes. I feel that is one of a very, very key way of integrating the wisdom. And I am just really grateful to be here with you today, John, and thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Super nice to have you back. And it was really awesome. I sort of felt myself going deeper into the Enneagram wisdom. That first episode, if you haven't heard it, is episode 58, and it was released on November 1st, 2016. It's actually you know what's really great about this is that it's not so highly structured. I know it's complex, but it's not so highly structured that you can actually listen to this episode and then go back and listen to 58.
Right.
And it will just make sense. Just as if you had listened to 58 and then listened to this episode, which I think will be episode 60, but I'm not quite sure yet.
Yes.
In other words, there's no starting place, stopping place. There's so much to it that you just pick it up. But the fundamentals of what you're talking about is that every one of these quote unquote numbers exist and live within us. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And thanks again for being here.